when you start to hit capacity constraints, it forces you into making decisions in terms of kind of improving efficiencies and finding ways of doing things better.
This podcast encourages and empowers you to create your own unique real story, develop your own unique real statement, and discover your own unique real self. The power is yours. Good morning, Robin Waite. Previously, episode 1499 of the 12-Minute Convos podcast. It's been just 2 years, 2 months, 13 days, and 5 hours since we last recorded that conversation. That was then. This is now. Robin, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really well, thank you, ever so well, and life has just got a little bit busier.
Well, that sounds as though it's something that the seed you planted when we were speaking is now bearing fruit. Of course, when we did speak that time, you were doing a ton of things, right? From the coaching services that you were doing for professional services after having your agency and launching into consultancy. And of course, the riding part, right? The part where you would cycle down the hills. I mean, that blew my mind, right? 50 miles per hour. How have things evolved? What's going on in your world today?
Well, the coaching program's grown, so it got so busy that we had to turn it into a group program, which is great because growth always creates evolution. So it's got much better. I've managed to enroll 3 coaches now as well to help me deliver that work.
Wow.
And still doing the cycling, still doing the crazy stuff, going down the hills at 50 plus miles an hour. And that's my escape on a Sunday now, just to kind of blow off some steam and get out in the Cotswolds countryside. So that's definitely still going, and I've also managed to I've kind of slowed things down actually in a way because I've moved out. I had an office in the centre of our local town, and I've actually moved back home, and it's been glorious because it means I can actually look out of my window now in my studio here, and I can see trees and green fields and cows, which is just spectacular.
Yeah, that's refreshing. It sounds absolutely refreshing. Again, one of the aspects of our conversation, that song you chose, right? Oasis, and how you represented being an oasis in the midst of the desert for so many other people. It's really cool that you've gone back to a place where you can call it the oasis. That's really cool, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's I think that's what I needed to do because life was getting quite frenetic, and actually in order to kind of be grounded and centered for all of my clients and my family and sort of other people around, I think I needed to kind of take that bit of a step back in my world just to kind of slow things down a bit. And the Oasis thing is interesting because I've actually taken up surfing in a big way as well. So water is becoming quite a big part of my life now.
Wow.
And we've got, I don't know if I think I've seen a couple in the States and dotted around the world. I know there's definitely one in Spain, but they've just opened up a wave garden down in Bristol, which is my local city. And it's a 200-meter long lagoon split into 2 outdoors. So I've been surfing in January here in pretty much 0 degrees, which is bitterly cold, but also just blows your mind. It's so much fun.
Yeah, it's really interesting what we can create in the midst of the mindset, isn't it? I mean, something like that a couple of years ago would have been something that is put down, right? Like, how ridiculous is that? But the mind shift, it's really fascinating. And of course, you're seeing that with those you're working. Is that accurate?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, people are getting much better results now, and that's not to say that I wasn't sort of doing a good job in terms of the coaching when we spoke a couple of years ago. Like I said, it's just an evolution. When you start to hit capacity constraints, it forces you into making decisions in terms of kind of improving efficiencies and finding ways of doing things better. And I think sometimes if you're not pushed like that, if your back's not against the wall, sometimes you avoid making those really difficult decisions, and the evolution just doesn't happen. So it was a process. It's been a tough process, but it was a process we needed to go through.
Now, when you say we, there are 2 children in the midst of that, right? What is something around like 2.5 years, 15 months, a year and a half? So yeah, probably like 3 or just over 3 and one just over 5, right?
That's it. You've got a great memory. Yeah. So they're 5 and 3. So the eldest one's now at school, and the youngest one will actually be starting school in September. So which would be nice because it means I don't have to kind of dart around from sort of home and then nursery and school and doing this sort of merry dance around all the place.
Yeah, one drop off. Yeah, that's
one
really
drop
cool.
off for a few years, which would be nice.
How have they been affected by everything that's going on? Of course, we understand that more is caught than taught, right? So there may be some small trinkets of, wow, I'm doing this and it's impacting them in this way. Are you seeing that?
I mean, having spent sort of moved back to home now in terms of from a work perspective, it's been really nice just to be able to get more involved with doing those drop-offs and pickups, but also, you know, I'm around at lunchtime. I'm around when they come home, and even if I'm not, you know, even if I'm not available, if I'm busy on a call or something like that, or doing some coaching work, just the fact that we're kind of there's the presence, we're kind of near each other, I think has kind of made things just that little bit easier and created a bit more of a stronger bond between me and the girls.
Now, you love to do things with your hands. You had the studio, well, your office in the city of where you are, right? Was it a big DIY getting back home, separating yourself? Because it's so important to separate yourself from the children when you're working at home, right?
That's right.
Was that something that happened?
100%, yeah. It was so we used to have this beaten up old shed sort of opposite the house, and I was like, that would be the perfect spot for a studio because it's just slightly raised up just behind the house. It's got a great view. And so I ended up tearing that down. I kept all the wood and just milled it and used that as the frame for the studio, which I've got now. So I've got a hand built. It's a cedar clad studio. It's got some like amazing views. It's all heated and lit up and everything. Managed to get the internet beamed across from the house as well. So I've got a little snug, like little home from home, you know, just and literally it's you could, you know, 20 meters away from the house, which is just absolutely fantastic.
There's a theme that's evolving on the podcast where I'm seeing that, well, I'm saying we, because, you know, my wife helps with the aspect of when I put a thought out there to help me construct it. So we did wealth. The acronym for that is when essential action leads to happiness, right? You did that, right? You made a decision, right? Essential action was required and you did it. And then there's voice, right? Yeah. And that's venturing onward into conversations everywhere. So that's part of it. The voice, though, how do you define that in your life? That voice that said, hey, you should move, or when you're speaking to a client, you should ask this question. How do you train that discernment?
For me, it's initially you have to just understand what are the right questions to ask, which is and being prepared to kind of not just kind of, you know, mess around at the surface level of things. You've got to delve 7 layers deep, and that involves being brave with the questions you're asking, which always kind of start with the who, the where, the what, when, how, why, those sorts of things. But then being prepared to keep on digging. And for me, it's over a number of years, I've managed to be able to develop much more of an intuition when it comes to asking those questions of myself, but also, you know, of my clients. And for me, when I was making the decision, you know, it's quite a hard decision to give up an office you've had for 8 years, 9 years nearly. And, you know, it took me 9 months to build this, the studio I'm in now, and to come back home. But it just got to a point where I just knew. I kind of gone through all of the practical stuff, the affordability and the driving, like I said, around doing that merry dance between schools and the office and the home and all that sort of stuff. Kind of went around that for about a month or two. And then I was just like, no, the only way I'm ever going to know if this is the right decision is to just do it. And there's plenty of other offices. If I come home and it doesn't work, you know, then, you know, get back out of Dodge and go and find another office. But it's worked out brilliantly. I've been in here now for, I think, about 4 or 5 months and just settled in really nicely. There's a few boxes which I've still got to unpack from my old office, but it's just been allowed me to sort of calm down and just take the time to kind of think a little bit more. And it's probably given me, believe it or not, an extra hour a day, I would say, over what I had before.
Your father has passed what is about 7 years now from when we last spoke. In the midst of your decisions, in the midst of intuition being at the forefront, the conversation of death, the possibility that you could die today or tomorrow, is that something that you interact with in the forefront or the back end of your thinking?
It's more so in the back end of my thinking now. I mean, yeah, it's been close to 7 years now since Dad passed away, and it's one of those things I do think about him every day, but in a very positive frame of light. I think there was still a lot of anger and animosity, in the early days after he passed away. But no, now I kind of what's been nice is the girls have grown up. I've kind of started to understand much more about the things that he struggled with in his life and the successes which he created in his life, and how important family was to him, which is, believe it or not, it's something which we never really had the opportunity to discuss whilst he was still around. But how he behaved, how he felt about stuff, and the conversations that we did manage to have about other stuff, I've actually learned a lot more about him, I think, since he passed away, which is a bit sad, but it's a bit bittersweet. It's kind of happy as well. So there's a lot which I've been able to take in on my journey as a parent, I think, now.
Amazing audience. If you aren't interested just yet in how to find out more about this guy, well, I don't know what else you need to hear. Robin, where's the best place for them to go to find out more about you?
So the best place is probably either one of my websites. So I've got robinwaite.com, which has got my blog on it and various other things like that. And then I've got fearless.biz. So if you've got any listeners who are business owners and want access to a few resources, you can. And also I've got a couple of books as well, which I think I mentioned on episode 1,499. Take your shot. Absolutely. There we go. So I've got several books which are all available on Amazon, but Take Your Shot is the is the story about Russ, who was one of my early clients who was kind of struggling with his life, and how we took him on a journey and turned things around for him. So it's one of my favorite stories to tell people, and I love sharing it. So if anybody can help me out and grab it on Amazon, I'd always be grateful.
Such a grand opportunity to call and to find out that you've not given up, and to hear how your story has evolved. It is both motivational and inspirational. Thank you for your service to humanity. You could have kept this bottled up, but you've decided to share and help other people pursue excellence. Again, Robin, a pleasure. I treasure. In closing, is there anything else you'd like to share with our amazing audience?
No, I'm just incredibly grateful for the opportunity to come back on. It's always nice to, sometimes you do interviews and lose touch, but it's really nice to that you've come back and we've had this opportunity to reconnect again. So thank you.
Definitely. Robin Waite, folks. Thank you for being on what is inspired by 12-Minute Convos with Angel Jones. This podcast is produced by Pod Edits. Visit podedits.com for professional podcast publishing.